Thanks to Andrew and John. Thank you for being here this morning. I'm going to do something a little bit different this morning, and I really seem like I'm always running out of time, and this is the wrong thing to do for time, but I would like to just take a brief look at what we've talked about and just kind of set the stage of what this class is all about. The premise of this series is to develop church leaders. Leadership in the church is critically important, and I think it's critical for the church today. And then we looked at a lot of books that I would recommend reading, and we've talked about some of those in detail. I was reminded last week of They Smell Like Sheep, one of the comments or stories in that book, and so I just thought I'd share that with you this morning because it's really telling. There's a story of, it's on page 16 of that book, I went back and found in the book precisely where it is. There's a story of about 5 or maybe more shepherds that gathered all of their shepherds together in a group, and they were talking or whatever, and then they got ready to leave, and the shepherds just went their separate ways. And all the sheep just followed their shepherd. Except there were a few stragglers, and one shepherd would just speak to them, say whatever, yippee-yi-yi, or I don't know, whatever, and those sheep knew his voice and they followed him, and another would do the same, and the sheep would just leave, just go away and just follow the sheep. And so the point is, sheep follow their shepherds, and especially their voice. But these are our books, and today we're going to concentrate on Good to Great, and we're going to talk about 7 Habits a little bit, but these are books that are good for us to read. So what is leadership? We started out talking about a leader is really transformational leadership, changing leadership. Even this morning in our sermon, if I'm a Christian, I'm a changed person. And so leaders want to help develop and lead people into change, into positive change in their life. And so a leader is one who commits people to action, who converts followers into leaders, and who even may convert leaders into agents of change. And then we also talked about being a critical thinker. Don't just take hook, and line, and sinker what someone says it is, but be a critical thinker, meaning search the scriptures so that you know what's being taught is true. And then there are there's C's in leadership that Designed to Lead talked about conviction, the things that you've heard, and without it, you're going to fail. Also talked about culture, and culture is important, and also talked about constructs, and that's just really systems or processes in place to make it happen. But let's dive into culture just a little bit and talk about a low trust culture. A low trust culture is not what you want, because that's high control management, that is political posturing, protectionism, cynicism, internal competition, all these type things. And with that kind of trust, low trust, then culture simply cannot work. On the other hand, we want to have a healthy culture with a strong identity, a clear mission, and one that develops and employs godly leaders. And again, the reason and the thought behind this class is to help develop us as we grow up in the church here to be better leaders and to have better leaders. Then we talked about vulnerability. And vulnerability is having the courage to tackle the hard problems, even knowing that uncertainty exists, and even knowing that there will be risk, and even understanding that there will be emotional anxiety. Then we went and we talked about this pyramid. And this pyramid, it's a model. If we want results, we have to have accountability. If we want accountability, we have to have commitment. If we want commitment, we have to undergo conflict. And if we undergo conflict, then we have to have trust. And this is really a basis of a lot we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about culture just now as we came into this. If we don't start with trust, then it is no good. So as we look at these things on this, which is the most important? Trust is the most important. You want results. You want to finally get there and get results. But if you don't have the basis, then you're not going to build. So you really need the basis. I say if you have good trust, and if you have good basis, and if you know the steps, then it's easy to follow and go up. But if there is no trust there, then you're going to lose even from the beginning. And then last week we talked about sheep and how and what we need to do as sheep. And just in a summarization, he says we don't want to look for gaining power or recognition. We don't want to tend to worry, and we don't want to be lazy. We don't want to simply give in, and we don't want to feel uniquely picked on. And so that's just kind of what we've talked about so far, and kind of bring you up to speed on where we are. So today, then we're going to be talking about growth. In 2 Peter chapter 2 and verse 5 through 9, it talks about growing. And as a matter of fact, we often teach our children a song. And maybe it's not just a children's song, but we generally think of it as a children's song. Read your Bible, pray every day, and you grow, grow, grow. You believe that? We teach our children that. I do. I absolutely believe that. If we're reading our Bible and praying every day, we're going to grow. And in 2 Peter chapter 1 and verse 5 through 9, he talks about growing in faith, in virtue, knowledge, self-control, steadfastness, godliness, brotherly affection, and love. Jesus grew, by the way, Luke 2:52. How did he grow? In wisdom, stature, in favor with God, and in favor with man. So growing is important. I even say, and I even believe, that we need to grow in our methods, in our understanding, in our leadership skills. And so while all of this doctrine is absolutely true and is a must in its very first, I still think there are opportunities for us to grow in our leadership understanding and our leadership abilities. And I believe that we can take the good lessons from the business world and apply it to us in our lives. And so that's what we're doing really in this series. Once again today, I have so much that I want to cover that I'm going to just shoot some slides up there and not really go over them much. That's, again, the reason for the handout. Because there's things on your handout. You may see the slide, but we're not going to go into it in a lot of details. Here's 2 Peter chapter 1, verse 5 that we talked about. So I want you to be thinking about growth and what growth means and how that growth can, just be ready and to discuss growth. We need to talk about growing incrementally and radically. There are two different types of growth, and we're going to talk about each of those, and I think we need to grow in both of those ways. So in the business world, we talk about things like plan, do, check, and act. We need to plan for where we're going, and then we need to actively do it. And then we check what we've done to see where we thought we were going to go, and then we need to act because most likely we can improve it and go again. And so we plan again, and it's just a continuous circle for continuous improvement, gradual improvement. And this is the way that we go. So just a little bit off target though, because I think of this circle and this continuous circle. What's a continuous circle? Let me just give you an example. Let me tell you what the continuous circle is, and then you tell me where this is found in Scripture. Compromise, apostasy, foreign invasion, repentance, and deliverance. What book in the Bible is that? The Bible. Say it out loud, John. Judges. It's a continual cycle. And with this deliverance is new judges. And then they go in this cycle. But the truth of the matter is, as they go in this cycle, rather than continuous improvement, it's a continuous spiral downward. Every time it seems to get a little bit worse, a little bit worse. So that's a wrong example of continuous improvement. And continuous improvement is we want to improve and grow as a result of these each time. So,
the good thing about continuous improvement is you can enter it at any point.
Okay.
You don't have to start at the plan spot. You're right here at the do or the act.
That's a very good point.
Evaluate where you are and then begin. And the only thing, and I will take, okay, instead of saying this is business model that we apply to the world, I would say the reverse of that. This is Jesus' model and the Bible.
Okay.
That has been applied to the world.
That's a very good.
I won't give you credit.
That's a very good point. That's a very valid thing to say. So if we look at gradual, continuous growth, it looks like that. Should we be doing that? Absolutely. But should from time to time we have radical growth and then continually growing, and then radical growth and then continually growing? And I think the answer is yes. And this gradual growth is called Kaizen, and that's just it's a continually looking at things and just gradually improving. But then there's and I never used this word, so I don't know if Tim, if you know how to pronounce it, or somebody knows how to pronounce Kaiku, I don't know what that, but anyhow, that's radical growth. That is, all of a sudden, we're going like this, and then boost, we grow all of a sudden. There's a shot in the arm. There's an extra shot that we take to make us grow even a little bit better. And by the way, these are not mutually exclusive. They working at the same time. So, radical change examples, I think, and these are just some examples. Vacation Bible School, it's once a year. It's just a shot in the arm. Big campaign was very simple. It's a shot in the arm to grow and to get better and to all of a sudden, it's a shot in the arm. So mission trips, for example, are examples. At the end of the city ministry, the entire program is an example of a radical shift and a radical change. Really, as a result of COVID, we made lots of different changes. We were forced into these changes, but I think that we can grow from them. I think we can accept them and understand how good they are and how good they can make us be better. Worshiping online, okay, we didn't want to do that, but we ended up doing that, and it was good for a while we were doing it. But now we are continuing to have that opportunity because it continues to help us reach people in the community, number one. And number two, people who are at home and unable to get out, they can worship online. You can say we always had that. Yes, we did. But it wasn't as well known. And today it is more common that people are who are at home and can't get out are worshiping online. Then giving online, we can do that. That's a positive change that we've done. A mentoring program. JD has a mentoring program every Sunday night in the Yak at 6 o'clock. You may not know about that. That's a mentoring program. That's a new radical change that's been made to help give us a boost. Kid Action. Now we have a new format. It's going through the 5th grade. Special classes and so forth. Even changing to 6:30 on Wednesday night. That's somewhat of a radical change because we've always done it the other way around. So even if you apply some names to these people, VBS, Chad, Andrew, Amy, Annette, Allison are big in a lot of that, leading those things. Missions is John. JD is mentoring. Worship online, Chad, Andrew, and others. Jail ministry, that's another thing. Doug Williams, Ed Self, Kathy Tucker, and Wanda help that, as well as a lot of other people helping in that. And then some things as a result of COVID results. We've already talked about those, but some people who are really helping, leading, and taking in charge of that is Jody P., Debbie Wiles, Austin from the beginning in that connection. And then we had special classes. Dr. McClure, Dr. Fulks, John Winchester, Tommy Gore. We had Fruit of the Spirit classes. All these things are really radical changes that could help give us a real boost, even though we were forced into those changes. These are just to mention a few, and certainly not totally all-inclusive. So, one of the tools for radical change is a SWOT analysis. And if you're not familiar with that, and I'm giving you an example, this is a business example, but it's really just getting together and brainstorming and understand my strengths, understand my weaknesses, understand my opportunities, understand threats that might come in, using those together and building a strategy to go forward. And that is an example of a tool to help in developing radical change. So today I want to talk about growing and being better. We're going to talk about, I'm just going to mention the first three. Covey, Maslow, and Maxwell, but we're going to zero in on Collins. So here's Covey's, and this is the 7 habits. Here is Maslow's, and these are in the handout. So this is Maslow's, and you work on climbing a ladder to get to the top. This is Maxwell, and John Maxwell, and the top is pinnacle. People respect you for who you are. But then this is Collins, and that's where I want to go to today and look at it. So we see that the executive or the top rung works to build enduring greatness. Greatness that lasts, greatness that goes on, not just now, but it's through professional will and personal humility. And he even says it's a paradoxical combination. In other words, it seems like two different extremes. But really, you need both of those to grow and go on. And in this enduring greatness, you don't want to follow a leader. If you have one leader and that leader is there, and Collins gives examples of where you have one leader and the company is so great as long as they're there. When that leader dies, or when that leader moves on, or when something happens to that leader, the company just takes a nosedive. That's not the kind of leader you want. That's not the kind of leaders that we want in the church. We want the church to be there, and so even when the leaders move on, the church continues to grow. Not endure, not stay the same in status quo, but continues to grow. And so that's where Collins is coming from. Collins has this, I think he calls it a flywheel, but anyhow, good to great concept. He says it's focused on discipline. You have disciplined level 5 leadership. You have the idea of first who, then what. In other words, get right people on the bus. It's another, John Gordon, I believe, is a book. He talks about get people on the bus, get the right people on the bus. Well, Collins says a lot of the same things. Get the right people on the bus. Get people involved that are the right people, and then find a job for them because they can help grow, not the other way around. And then he says disciplined thought. He says, and we're going to be talking about these in more detail, so I'm just going to mention these now and we'll talk about them more. Confront the brutal facts and hedgehog concepts. And I don't understand that without him telling me, so I'll show that to you in a minute. And then for action, culture of discipline and technology accelerator. And I'll talk about that a little bit. As a matter of fact, let's go ahead and talk about hedgehog. Hedgehog is companies or churches who look for the new technology and how to develop it and how to make it work. As opposed to good companies who see other people have done that and now we'll take and we'll follow the lead and we'll do that too. Great companies, great churches, great people who are striving to move forward are going to find this new technology and see that it make it work. But let me ask you this. If I do that, will I ever fail in the process? Absolutely. Well, we shouldn't do that then, right? Wrong. Wrong. If I'm reaching forward and if I'm going forward, then I'm going to fail from time to time, but then I'll know that wasn't a good way to do it, and let's go another way. So continuing to reach up and to reach forward. So then he talks about culture of discipline and technology accelerator. So there's a difference between leadership and management. As a matter of fact, if you look at Collins' level 5 hierarchy, he talks about level 3 as a manager and level 1 is a leader. And one thing that he points out is leadership shouldn't be conceived as being void of good management skills. You need good management skills. It's just that leadership should be represented by a mindset in which good management principles are subordinated by and subservient to good leadership. In other words, I want to have good management skills, but I need to think like a leader. I need to grow into this leadership role in this leadership. And so you look at the categories of leadership as opposed to management. For example, just take one. A leadership has vision and management has objectives. A leadership sees the horizon and management eyes the bottom line. So there's nothing wrong with looking at the bottom line, but let's look at the vision and let's see how we can grow for that. People follow leaders. People work for managers. So if I want to be a leader, if I want people to follow me, then I use those principles of leadership rather than the thought of all these management ideas.
Jerry,
Yes.
I think something that I've noticed is back to where you fail. If you fail fast, and that's a term people use, but if you let a decision drag out, and a lot of people, let's use the 6:30 on Wednesday night. If you let it drag out and get debated for 6 months, people are frustrated and unhappy. Whereas you listen to people for a couple of weeks, make a decision, then it works or doesn't work, right? If it doesn't work, you got to say, okay, we'll change it.
Yeah.
But getting to the point of making a decision and moving on, people that didn't want to do it either see that it worked and that they were wrong, or they were right and you acknowledge it, so you build trust.
Mm-hmm.
But getting to the decision quickly is important. And these days, people want to drag it out
Yeah.
and debate for a long time.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's a very good point, David.
Well, I know the reason and purpose you have this course, I really do. But I will tell you that along with the outcome of this is what we call executive functioning. This applies to children, this applies to schools, this applies to the classroom, to anybody. We should be training our children. It's called executive functioning. Does your child have executive function? They don't rise to this level. Now, yeah, they got to have their management skills down here, their organization skills. That's what's so good about this. I mean, we should be doing this in our Sunday school classrooms. I mean, our children, you know, I make you behave because I give you a sticker, but I've got to eventually get to that higher level.
Right.
These kind of things. This is fabulous.
Yeah, okay. All right, good point. So, leadership does not mean I have control. There's a book named Humble Inquiry, and the theme of that book is, do what? I'll see it. Anyhow, in that book, under this topic where culture favors telling over asking, this guy asked a bunch of management recruitees and people who were working to get in a management position, says, what does it mean for you to be promoted as a manager? It means I get to tell people what to do. Wrong philosophy. Wrong philosophy. And it's the wrong philosophy. So, getting back to this idea of leaders versus managers, Covey says, if my ladder is on the wrong wall, I can work hard and work harder and harder and harder, and where am I going? Faster in the wrong direction. So managers are people who do things right. Even if my ladder's on the wrong wall, I'm doing it right because I'm working hard to get up. I need to make sure first my ladder's on the right wall. In other words, make sure the direction I'm going is the right direction, and then work hard getting there. Eisenhower said that leadership is the art of getting someone to do something else, getting someone else to do something you want done because he wants to do it. And then this last one we've mentioned several times. Going into Collins, in chapter 2, he says that good to great leaders are not I-centric. Centric meaning where my focus is. It's not, you know, how many times have we talked about selfishness in this class so far? It seems like every week this selfishness idea is brought up again. Not being selfish. Great leaders are not selfish. It says they are quiet, shy. I'm not sure I totally agree with that, but I understand the concept is the lesson is larger than life. Don't come in and I'm larger than life, look at me, look how great I am. But on the other hand, be humble and mild-mannered. And that's certainly true and what we need to be. So, we need to have a climate where the truth is heard. Leadership is about vision, but leadership is equally about creating a climate where the truth is heard and the brutal facts are confronted. We want to talk about motivating people, and he says that, well, it's largely a waste of time because if you get the right people on the bus, if you have the right people in place, you don't have to worry about motivating them because they will be motivated. He says there's a huge difference between opportunity to have your say and opportunity to be heard. Okay, say what you want to say, and you say it, okay, now let's go where we're going. Well, that's not the opportunity to be heard. If we are going to have trust, we're going to have conflict, and we're going to give people the opportunity to be heard and listen and take and understand those thoughts and progress accordingly going forward, as opposed to just listening to words come out of your mouth. So how do you create a culture, actually he says a climate, where the truth is heard? I would even say that's what I'm talking about, is a culture. It's not just a climate where the truth is heard. That's what our culture should be, is creating a place where the truth is heard. And he says, there's 4 things. I'm going to talk about 3 of them. This dual red flags mechanisms, I'm bypassing that one. I think the first 3 applies to us, and I think we can learn from it. He says, lead with questions. And, things like, what's on your mind? Can you tell me about that? Or what should we be doing maybe going forward? Just giving people the opportunity to think about and to interact with. Doesn't mean that they're going to tell you what to do, but if you learn what's on the minds of people, then that will help you in... As a matter of fact, let's look at this bottom part. Let's blow it up where we can read it. He says, leading from good to great doesn't mean coming up with all the answers and saying, okay, this is what we're going to do. But instead, it means being humble enough to say, I don't know all the answers, and so let's talk about it, and we can get some good ideas together, and we can go forward from that. Secondly, he says, we need to engage in dialogue and debate, not coercion, not forcing people, not declaring we got to move it, but we talked about that. Again, if we have trust, then we can have conflict and we can have that debate. Disagree passionately. Do not fear conflict. And then the third thing he says, we need to conduct autopsies without blame. We need to look and say, okay, we have a problem. What was this problem? And what can we do to overcome this problem? And by the way, yeah, look what you did. How could you have done such a thing? You're the reason that we went down this path. Wrong approach. Don't go around calling blame and putting blame out for everybody for where we've gone. But instead, look at what went wrong as opposed to who made it go wrong. Because as we said, Tim, we all are going to fail from time to time. And that's great because we're growing and we're improving. We're not just stagnant and just making sure nothing ever goes awry, but we're constantly improving. Into chapter 4, he talks about, Collins was reading this book about Stockdale, and I remember, well, that's too much, I don't have time to go into that. So let's just talk about, he says, I was reading this book, Love and War, and I became depressed, even though I knew the answer. Because Stockdale it was Admiral Jim, I think it was his first name, Jim Stockdale, was in Hanoi. They called it the Hanoi Hilton because he was the highest ranking officer that was captured and was a POW. And he was there for 7 or 8 years. And time and time and time again, he was tortured beyond belief. But he stood firm and he stood there, and he never lost faith. And Collins says it's so bad. As I was reading this book, I became depressed, even though I knew the ending. How did Stockdale deal with this? He says, I never lost faith in the end of the story. I never believed that I wouldn't get out and be strong. But I faced the brutal facts that were occurring day to day and dealt with those facts. He goes on to say, well, who didn't make it out? And he says, well, the optimists are the people who didn't make it out. You go, really? We want to be optimists. But he says, the people who says, yeah, we're going to make it out by Christmas. Even though there was no solid reason for that potentially coming, it's just, they just let that go. We're going to be out by Christmas. It didn't happen. We'll be out by Easter. It didn't happen again and again. And so they're the ones that didn't make it out because they died of a broken heart. He says, the lesson is, you must never confuse faith that you will prevail in the end. With the discipline to confront the most brutal facts of your current reality. And so we need to be there today. Let's go ahead and look at the next slide.
Yeah, go back. That's important.
Yep.
Just going to confront the most brutal facts of your current reality. That is one of the biggest things that's lacking in our society today. Because to your previous slide, nobody wants to blame anybody or talk about those things, and so you just kind of deal with it or talk about it behind the scenes instead of just addressing it head on and fixing the problem. I think that right there is one of the biggest things we struggle with today.
And that's the reason I put this pyramid on the board again today, because I know this was 2 sessions ago. I think this is the basis of everything. The basis of everything is having trust so that we can have this conflict, so that we can get a commitment and accountability, and then go forward and get results. Yeah.
The person you're having conflict with, you probably don't have trust with. But if you don't have conflict with them, you're going to lose the trust of the rest of the team and the rest of the people.
Right. The conflict needs to not be mean-spirited conflict, but to say my piece, and let's get it out. Let's talk about it, and let's see. And together we'll come out with a commitment as a result of it. Yeah, those are good points. So, what did Collins learn? Can anybody say life can be unfair? All of us, right? Life can. Why did I get that disease? Why did my child have this problem? I still don't understand. Well, life can be unfair. We can use it as an advantage or a disadvantage. All of us are going to face disappointments. The difference in who we are is how we handle those disappointments. If we're looking for someone to blame, they sometimes happen with no reason. What separates people from this is not the absence of the difficulty, but how we react to it. And that really is our attitude. I'm not ready to talk about attitude today, but I'm going to take one class and develop attitude. It's really Charles Swindoll. I'm going to go over it and just remind you of attitude because it's so important. Stockdale said that he came back stronger from the difficulties. Where's a scripture that really says that if I have difficulties, then it's really going to make me stronger? Can you think of that scripture? The preachers won't. James chapter 1, verse 2 through 4. Count it a joy when you fall into different temptations, because that's going to make you stronger. Okay? And so that's what Stockdale said. Stockdale says, I wouldn't trade it. I wouldn't trade what happened to me for anything. Really? As Collins was interviewing him, he was limping because he was hurt from all the torture that he endured. And he says, I wouldn't trade it because it made me stronger. Now, to repeat, retain faith that will prevail in the end, regardless of the difficulties. And that's what we preach as Christians. We preach as Christians that, it's not going to necessarily be a bed of roses here, but I see the end goal. I see the end goal. And that's what counts, and that's what I need to think about. And at the same time, we need to deal with the brutal facts of where we are. And not sugarcoat them and act like nothing's going wrong and nothing is happening. But we need to deal with it. And then he says, the great companies weren't motivated by the fear of what they didn't understand, by the fear of looking like a chump, by the fear of watching others hit it big while they didn't, and by the fear of being hammered by the competition. They weren't, fear didn't bother them. Because, can I say, as Christians, we should say, we shouldn't let fear bother us, because what? God is on my side. God is on my side. So, here's Covey looking his number one, Maslow, Maxwell, all of them. So these are just kind of repeats, and these are in your book, and we've run out of time. I wanted to have some discussion, but you interacted in the middle of class, and but maybe you have something burning to say before we close. Thank you for being here. I know this is a little bit different class. We're talking about leadership concepts in the business world, but I think they can certainly be applied to us. And I think that if we use this, then we can be stronger leaders and even members of the church as we strive to follow our Lord. Thank you for being here this morning, and we are dismissed.